The canyon lay quiet beneath the falling dusk, its walls painted in bruised shades of violet and gold as the last light bled away. Wind whispered through the stone hollows, dry and sharp, carrying with it the scent of dust and sage. At the bottom, where the shadows settled thickest, a girl lay curled against the earth, her dress torn, her breath shallow, her strength nearly gone. She hadn't chosen this place. She had been left here, abandoned where the sun could burn her by day and the cold could gnaw at her by night. Her hands bore rope burns, her lips cracked from thirst. The dust clung to her lashes, so heavy she could hardly keep her eyes open. Somewhere above, a hawk circled, its cry cutting sharp through the canyon air as if mocking her weakness. Far off, the sound of hooves echoed faintly, a rhythm slow and steady, growing clearer with each passing moment. It belonged to a lone drifter, a man who had walked too long and ridden too far to call any stretch of land his own. He wasn't looking for trouble, not tonight. He only wanted ground flat enough to make a fire and air quiet enough to rest his weary bones. But as he guided his horse through the canyon floor, his eyes caught a shape slumped in the shadows. For a moment he thought it was just another trick of fading light. Then the figure stirred, faintly, like a dying ember trying to spark one last time. The drifter pulled his horse to a halt. His hand went instinctively to the worn revolver at his side, though there was no threat in the way the girl moved. Still, he stayed wary. Life in the canyons had taught him that danger often wore the weakest disguise. When the silence stretched, broken only by the restless shuffle of his horse's hooves, he dismounted. Dust rose around his boots as he crossed to her side. Her face came into view, pale under the grime, eyes fluttering open just enough to meet his. There was no cry for help, no words, only the fragile look of someone who had been pushed past the edge of her endurance and yet still clung stubbornly to the thread of life. The drifter crouched down, the canyon wind tugging at his coat. He knew he was staring at a choice. He could walk on, pretend he hadn't seen her, and keep his life simple. Or he could kneel down, lift her into his arms, and let her story become tangled with his own. For a man who'd made his living avoiding ties, that choice carried weight. But the night was coming fast, and the cold with it, and the look in her eyes, barely alive but still pleading, wasn't one he could ignore. He slipped an arm beneath her shoulders. The girl's body felt weightless in his arms, but not in a way that spoke of ease, more like a warning. She was starved down to bone and silence, her heat gone, her breath faint. The drifter had carried wounded men before, seen life bleed out on battlefields and in dusty street duels, but this was different. This was a life being quietly erased by neglect. His horse shifted uneasily when he laid her across the saddle, the animal's ears flicking at the change of weight. With one hand steadying her, the drifter took the reins and led them on, boots crunching over gravel and dust as he scanned the canyon walls for shelter. Night was falling fast. In the west, the last light had narrowed to a thin line of fire against the horizon, while shadows stretched long across the stone. Coyotes would be moving soon, their cries echoing through the gulches. If she was to make it through until morning, he'd need a fire, and he'd need it quick. He found a shallow hollow beneath an overhang of rock where the wind was less sharp. Kneeling, he spread his worn bedroll against the ground and set her down upon it. She stirred faintly at the movement, a whisper escaping her cracked lips, though no words follow. The drifter shrugged off his coat, heavy with dust and travel, and laid it across her shoulders. It swallowed her frame, but she didn't flinch from its weight. Instead, her fingers clutched, faintly at the fabric, as if her body, even unconscious, still knew to hold tight to whatever might keep her alive. He knelt a few feet away, gathering dry brush and brittle twigs. His hands worked with practiced speed, flint striking steel, sparks catching on kindling. Soon a small flame took, growing with each careful breath he fed it. The fire licked at the shadows, casting a flickering glow over the canyon hollow. When he looked back to her, the sight held him. The light made her face softer, pulling color from beneath the pallor. She was young, too young to have been left for the dust to swallow. He leaned closer, speaking in a low voice, more to test if she heard him than to ease his own mind. "Who left you here?" Her eyelids fluttered, and for a heartbeat he thought she might answer. but only a shiver passed through her, her lips moving without sound. The drifter poured a measure of water from his canteen into a tin cup and pressed it gently to her mouth. At first she resisted, but instinct won out. Her throat worked, taking in small sips, as if she feared the water might vanish if she drank too quickly. "Easy now," he murmured, steadying her. "There's enough." When she fell still again, he sat back on his heels, staring into the fire. Questions pressed in on him like the night itself: who she was, how she had come to be left like this, what danger might still be circling nearby. But none of those questions had answers yet. All he knew was this: if she hadn't been found tonight, the canyon would have claimed her before dawn. And so the drifter stayed close, feeding the fire, keeping the night at bay, and waiting for her strength, or her story, to return. The fire crackled low, throwing out thin tongues of light that danced against the canyon walls. The drifter sat cross-legged beside it, his hat pulled low, watching the girl from beneath the brim. She lay on his coat, her breaths uneven, as if even sleep cost her more strength than she could afford. Every so often she twitched, hands clenching, lips moving, but no sound came. He'd seen that before in men fevered from wounds, the body fighting shadows of memory just as fierce as the world outside. He poured another cup of water, warming it a little by the fire, then leaned over. "Try again," he said softly, steadying her head with one rough hand. The cup touched her lips. She sipped, just enough to wet her throat, then coughed weakly. Her eyes fluttered open. For the first time he saw their color, hazel, though dulled by exhaustion. She looked around as if expecting something or someone to be there. When her gaze fixed on him, she flinched, small as the movement was. "It's all right," the drifter murmured, pulling back enough not to crowd her. "You're safe." Her mouth moved, cracked lips forming the shape of words that didn't rise. He leaned closer, catching them on the second try. "Gone," she whispered. The word was brittle as the canyon wind. "Who's gone?" he asked. She blinked slow, then turned her face toward the fire. For a long moment, the only answer was silence. Then, haltingly, she gave him more. "They left me." Her voice rasped, but there was steel buried somewhere inside it. The drifter waited, letting her gather the strength to continue. "Wagon train," she said finally. "Family, traders, came through the pass." Her breath caught. "Argued," men said. "No use keeping me." The drifter's jaw tightened. He'd heard of men leaving behind wagons, even livestock, when the trail turned cruel. But leaving a girl? That cut deeper than neglect. "How long ago?" he asked. Her eyes shifted, searching the firelight as though it might hold the answer. "Day, maybe more." He nodded, filing it away. That meant whoever abandoned her wasn't far ahead. A day's lead in the canyon wasn't much. "You've been without food?" Her silence was answer enough. He dug into his saddlebag, pulling out a strip of jerky. Tearing it into small fibers, he set a few in her hand. She stared at them as though unsure whether to trust even food. But hunger drove her, and slowly she brought one to her lips, chewing with effort. The drifter kept his voice low, steady. "I'll see you through the night. At first light, we'll find the trail." She looked at him then, really looked, as though weighing whether his word was worth anything. Whatever she saw, it eased her shoulders a fraction, but she wasn't ready to surrender sleep. Instead, her gaze drifted to the canyon mouth, shadows swallowing the far side. Her whisper came again, so faint he almost missed it. "They'll come back." The drifter frowned. "The wagon train?" Her lips pressed tight. After a moment, she shook her head. "Not them. The ones that follow." He studied her, the fire throwing lines of exhaustion across her face. He didn't ask more. Some truths were better coaxed in daylight. For now, he let the fire fill the silence, though every muscle in him stayed taut. Coyotes yipped somewhere far off. The sound carried through the gulch, sharp against the stillness. His horse stamped once, ears pricked. The drifter set a hand on his revolver out of habit, eyes scanning the darkness. When he looked back, the girl had fallen into shallow, restless sleep. One hand remained tangled in his coat, clutching it as though it tethered her to life itself. The drifter leaned back against the rock wall, rifle laid across his knees. He'd keep the fire alive, but his eyes would stay sharper. Out here, night belonged to predators, both four-legged and two, and if what she whispered was true, if something was following, then morning might not come easy. The drifter didn't sleep. He knew better than that. A man alone on the trail could afford shut-eye under the stars, but not when there was someone weak at his side and words of the ones that follow whispering in his ears. The fire snapped and hissed, but it was dying too quick. He rose, careful not to jostle the girl, and fed it with more mesquite branches. Sparks leapt skyward, scattered, and died in the black expanse above. The horse lifted its head suddenly, ears stiff, nostrils flaring. The drifter stilled. His hand went to the rifle without thought. He strained his ears against the canyon hush. For a moment, there was only wind dragging its cold fingers through the rocks. Then, faint. Hooves. Not the heavy cadence of a herd. Not the steady rhythm of a rider making distance. These came slow, measured, deliberate. He crouched by the girl, shaking her shoulder gently. Wake. Her eyes opened groggy, then widened as if memory snapped her awake sharper than fear. She pushed herself up on weak elbows. "They're here," she whispered. "Who?" Her answer came in a voice too small for the firelight. "Men. Hunters." The drifter didn't press. Her fear was enough. He tossed dirt over part of the fire until its glow shrank to embers. Shadows closed in, thick and pressing. He led her to a nook in the rock wall where the canyon had broken inward. "Stay low," he said, "no matter what you hear." Her hand caught his coat before he could move away. Her fingers trembled, but her grip was fierce. "They don't stop," she whispered. "They don't forgive." He pried her hand gently free. "Neither do I." Then he was gone into the dark. The drifter slipped between boulders, rifle ready, breath slow. The canyon funneled sound. Every shuffle and scrape carried farther than it should. But he trusted the rocks. He knew how to move without leaving echoes behind. The hoofbeats grew clearer. He pressed himself against a ledge and peered out. 3 riders. Silhouettes against the starlight, moving single file down the gulch. No lanterns, no talking. Only the creak of leather and the thud of hooves. The lead man dismounted, crouching low to study the dirt. Even from a distance, the drifter could see him trace fingers over the faint marks where his own boots had dragged the girl earlier. Trackers. Good ones. The man straightened, gave a ball, a signal with 2 fingers, and the other riders spread apart, predators fanning out. The drifter's jaw tightened. He could fight, but 3 against 1 in a canyon where stone bounced bullets and shadows hid knives was suicide. He backed away, careful, until he reached the girl again. She looked at him with wide, unblinking eyes. "How close?" she asked. "Close." She swallowed, pulling his coat tighter around herself. Her lips trembled. "If they find me, don't let them take me." Her meaning was clear enough. The drifter checked his rifle, then his revolver. The weapons felt heavy, not because of their weight, but because of the promise in her words. He didn't answer her with oaths. He just met her gaze, steady as stone, until she gave a faint nod. Then he doused the last of the fire. Darkness wrapped them whole. The riders' hoofbeats shifted, echoing nearer, then pausing. Silence pooled, thick as tar. Somewhere in that silence, a voice drifted, low, drawn out. "Girl." The sound carried unnaturally, as though the canyon itself helped it along. The drifter felt her body stiffen beside him, her breath hitched once. Another voice, rougher, came from the opposite side. "You can't hide." The drifter put his hand lightly over her shoulder. "Quiet." He drew her deeper into the cleft, pressing them both against cold stone. His ears tracked the hoofbeats, the scrape of boots, the grind of rocks shifting under careful steps. They were closing the noose. He needed an opening,